Welcome to our channel, the channel where real stories meet raw truth. Here, we shine a light on the battles we fought, the voices they tried to silence, and the victories they never saw coming. These aren't just stories. They're testaments of strength, dignity, and the power of rising when the world expects you to fall. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to our channel, tap the like button, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us keep bringing you interesting stories that deserves to be heard. Now, let's get into today's story. White attorney mocked black teen in court. Then he recited the law better than him. There are moments in life when the world doesn't expect you to speak. When they see your skin, your silence, your youth, and decide you have nothing worth saying. But sometimes, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the calm before a storm that changes everything. It was a humid Monday morning in Franklin County, Georgia. The courthouse hallway buzzed with routine. But inside courtroom 4B, something was about to break that routine forever. Elijah Brooks was just 17. A quiet black teen, thin framed with wary eyes and a neatly knotted tie that looked borrowed. He stood behind the defendant's table like he didn't belong, like the walls were pressing in on him. But something in his stance said he wasn't going anywhere. His crime? Disrupting the peace and obstruction of justice. But the real charge, the unspoken one, was being black in a space not built to see him. The story they told in the report was simple. Elijah refused to leave the public library after hours. That's it. But what the police left out was that Elijah was there writing an essay for a scholarship that could change his life. The library was a sanctuary, the only quiet place where Wi-Fi worked, where the lights stayed on longer than the ones back home. His mom worked night shifts. His little sister needed constant care. Elijah had no distractions in the library, just opportunity. But to the officers that showed up, a black teen in a hoodie at closing time wasn't a student. He was a suspect, not a scholar, just a problem. When they told him to leave, he softly asked, "Can I just finish my last paragraph?" They answered with cuffs and concrete, slammed him to the floor, arrested him like a criminal. The echo of that injustice still rang in his ears as he stood in court, the youngest person in the room, and easily the most underestimated. On the other side of the courtroom stood Gregory Shaw, a white attorney with decades of courtroom swagger and a face carved by smugness. He didn't just see Elijah as a defendant. He saw him as a target. Shaw chuckled as he flipped through his binder, glancing at Elijah like he was invisible. "Your Honor," Shaw began, his voice dripping with mockery, "we're here because a young man decided rules don't apply to him. This is not a civil rights issue. This is trespassing, plain and simple. He was told to leave and didn't. That's the law." The courtroom chuckled with him. The judge barely looked up. Elijah stood frozen, not in fear, but in thought, because while Shaw spoke with arrogance, Elijah had been preparing in silence. His court-appointed attorney hadn't shown up that morning, sick, they said. No replacement sent. No one seemed to care. But Elijah raised his hand and spoke quietly. "Your Honor, I'd like to represent myself." Shaw's laughter turned to amusement. "You sure you want to do that, boy?" Elijah didn't flinch. "Yes, I've done the reading." The judge paused and motioned, "Proceed." What happened next made the entire courtroom lean forward. Elijah stepped out from behind the table and pulled out a folder neatly organized. He cleared his throat. Under Georgia Code November 16th, 34, disorderly conduct involves intent to provoke violence or cause alarm. I did neither. I was in a public facility, using it for its intended purpose. I have time-stamped screenshots of the library's posted hours, which at the time were extended for exam season. Shaw blinked. The smirk faltered, but Elijah wasn't finished. Furthermore, the officers claimed I was uncooperative, but body cam footage shows me remaining calm, hands visible, asking only to finish a school assignment. That footage was obtained via Freedom of Information Act request I filed myself after my arraignment. A murmur swept the courtroom. The judge sat up straighter. Shaw shifted in his shoes. Elijah walked over to the monitor, plugged in a USB drive, and played the clip video footage of the night in question. The sound played loud and clear. "Can I just finish this page?" Then the rustle, then the thud, then silence. "As you can see, Elijah said softly. My tone was calm, my hands were raised, and I made no physical threat. And yet, I was treated like one. Shaw stood abruptly. Objection! He's dramatizing the issue. This is all rehearsed. Elijah turned to him slowly. Actually, sir, I'm citing state law, supported by footage and constitutional precedent. Perhaps you've heard of Graham versus Connor or Terry versus Ohio. Both cases require that officers assess reasonableness based on facts, not fear or bias. I suggest you read them again. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Even the bailiff raised an eyebrow. Elijah went on. He presented a chart, compiled from local police records, showing that over 80% of LIBOR-related arrests in the past 3 years involved black teens. Of those, less than 10% were convicted of any crime. This isn't an isolated incident, Elijah said. This is a pattern of racial profiling hiding behind policy. Shaw had no words, no witty retort, no smug grin. The judge looked at him. Counselor, do you have anything to add? Shaw's voice was low now. No, Your Honor. The judge turned back to Elijah. Anything further? Elijah nodded. Just this. He walked slowly back to the defendant's table, then turned to face the gallery, his voice steady but filled with quiet power. They called me boy when I walked in here, like my presence was a problem. But I've studied the law they tried to use against me. And what I've learned is this. Silence is not guilt. Youth is not ignorance. And the truth doesn't always come from behind a podium or a suit. It can come from a 17-year-old who decided that dignity was worth fighting for. The room froze. No one moved. The judge glanced down, then up. Mr. Brooks, in light of the evidence presented and the constitutional concerns you've raised, the charges against you are hereby dismissed. Elijah closed his eyes, just for a moment, then exhaled. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just gathered his things and walked out. But outside the courtroom, the real verdict began. A journalist had been in the back. The footage went viral. Within days, news stations aired the clip with headlines like, Teen outsmarts attorney in courtroom showdown, and young black scholar turns the table on the justice system. Law professors invited him to speak. Scholarships flooded in. Schools that once overlooked him now begged for his voice. And 1 year later, Elijah stood behind a different podium, this time at a legal symposium in Atlanta, invited as a keynote speaker. His mother sat front row, tears on her cheeks. He took the mic and looked out. They tried to label me a criminal for wanting to learn. They expected silence. I gave them the Constitution. I gave them truth. And what I learned is this. The law is not just a weapon used against us. It can be a shield when we know how to wield it. We don't have to be lawyers to understand justice. We just have to believe we deserve it. The room stood in ovation, because Elijah wasn't just a defendant anymore. He was a voice, a lesson, a symbol of what happens when underestimated becomes undeniable. And back in Franklin County Courthouse, the bench he once stood at is now engraved with a single plaque, in honor of those who speak truth, even when no one listens. And the lesson? Never let someone else's low expectations determine your worth. When they mock your voice, use it louder. When they question your presence, stand taller. Knowledge is power. But courage? Courage is what makes that knowledge unstoppable. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Black Struggles. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And keep standing for truth, because every voice matters, especially yours.